What's up, Facebook fam? Pastor Batson here with a word to the world in times like these. And so I've been thinking about this thing called faith. And if you've been watching the news and you've heard various governors, expressing their thoughts, their ideas. You've heard our president. You've heard in your locally, you've heard your mayors, and it's all confusing. Because there's no one single solidarity, solid message that's kind of going out to everybody at the same time. But I want to talk about the idea of God stretching our faith, because whatever else is taking place in the news media. One thing I can say personally is that God is indeed stretching my faith. And I would like to think that he's not just stretching my faith. I like to think he's stretching all of our faith. And there's a story in Genesis, Abraham, when he's taking his son up the mountain to sacrifice him. And he's done what God has, told him to do. He's walking in obedience to what God is saying. It's a difficult time. It's a very difficult passage to really comprehend. Why God would go this route to stretch Abraham's faith. In fact, it starts out, it comes to a place and says, after these things. Now, Abraham's been through hell and back, right? And God comes back and it's like, well, after these things, God did test Abraham, So it's like, everything that he went through, that wasn't a test. Like, that was just normal. Like, that was just getting him ready. That was pre-test. It's crazy, but it's amazing how what God does to really stretch our faith. And so there's 4 or 5 principles I think that we can learn though from Abraham's life and from his time of taking his son up the mountain to sacrifice him, that we learn, I believe, about stretching our faith. One, when your faith is being stretched, the first thing, you got to come out of a familiar place, because as long as you're in control and you know exactly where, how to move and, kind of get stuff done, it makes it a little bit easier to just maneuver and to feel comfortable. But it doesn't take a lot of faith in familiar places. But when you find yourself in unfamiliar territory, it's in that time that's when your faith is being stretched. And Abraham, from the very beginning, had to leave where he was. He left, Ur of the Chaldeans, told his wife, listen, we going. God is telling us where to go. We're going to go. We're going to figure this thing out. Where are we going? Try that. God, telling your spouse, your friends, telling your family, hey, I'm getting ready to go. Not running to the store, packing everything up. Well, where are you going to? That's one thing. If you know where you're going, you have a new house, a new address, or people can celebrate. People want to throw you a housewarming party. But if you load your car up, even just your car, much less a moving van, and say, I'm going wherever God tells me, people are gonna look at you like, what? Are you crazy? And that's the kind of faith, though. God is looking for crazy faith. And so if God's gonna stretch your faith, he's gotta take you out of familiar places. But then faith also allows for failures, because Abraham made plenty of mistakes. We know that Abraham was not a perfect man. He experienced failure after failure. But just because he was a failure does not mean that he's still not the father of the faithful. In fact, in Hebrews, he is heralded as the father of the faithful, even though he had failures. Why? Because just because you fail does not mean you don't have faith. And so your faith has to allow for some failures, but then he had to fail. His faith helped him to face his fears. I didn't realize that all these F's were in this thing, but his faith helped him to face his fears. What do you mean? Because he had to take his son up. That was a 3 days journey up this mountain. So for 3 days, he had to listen to his son say, this annoying thing that kids say. Are we there yet? Huh? Are we there yet? Are we almost there? Are we there yet? Did we make it? How much further do we have to go? Ooh, this is heavy. How much further? And whatever else we're saying in this season of Corona, I've had to listen to my 17-year-old daughter ask a question. When is this going to be over? How long do I have to stay in? When this is over, can I go outside? I've had to ask, and they're legitimate questions, and they're questions that not just her, but every one of us are asking. What are we there yet? How much longer? And that's what happens. Our faith doesn't get to determine how long we experience a thing, but our faith has to conquer our fears. And he was walking up, he was about to slay his son, and that's a fearful moment for a father. And he's wrestling with that in his own mind. So he had to deal with, places of unfamiliar, dealing with his failures, facing his fears, but also he learned the language of faith. Because look at what he says when he's getting ready to go up that mountain. He says, "Listen, his I and the lad," that's King James, "me and my son are going to go back and we will return." That's speaking the language of faith. He is learning to speak the language of faith. And whatever else our faith is supposed to teach us, it's supposed to teach us the language of faith, that we begin to speak those things that are not as though they were. He still had the fire in his hand, still had the wood, he still had to go up there and build the altar, but he's still, all the while he's facing these fears and he's still speaking now the language of faith. Listen, the Lord will provide. We're going to come back. He has to speak it in the face of adversity. I don't care what we all find ourselves going through. We are called to speak the language of faith, even in the face of adversity. We've got to learn this, to speak those things that are not as though they were, because that is the language of faith. And God wants us to do that. And every now and then it can really be confusing, because faith can sometimes look like the Siamese twin of foolishness. Look at what happens. He get up the mountain. He's got to actually build this altar. If you read the text, he actually ties his son to the altar. He literally takes the knife and he's about to stab. He's about to kill his son. He's about to go through it. Why? Because that is the place of the language of faith. It looks confusing. It looks crazy because he heard God say, "Okay, I'm going to provide it." Even though he's still speaking the language of faith, he's having to walk out this entire process. He even goes as much as lifting the knife up. But then the ultimate thing happens. He hears the voice of God saying, "Stop." He says, I'm going to provide for you a ram in the bush. Let me tell you what God is after when it comes to this thing called faith. He's after us learning to hear the voice of God. That's what our faith will do. Our faith and going and facing our fears and learning to speak the language of faith and all of those things that are looking crazy. God is after one thing, that we learn to hear his voice. Oh, if we could just learn to hear his voice, there are some mountains we wouldn't have to climb. There are some things we wouldn't have to go through, but he has to take us through them, because we have not yet learned how to hear his voice. We have not yet learned how to be sensitive to what he's saying. We are right, Carrie. We are learning. And while we're earning and learning at the same time. You're absolutely right. That's a part of the process. Listen, whatever else we do during this time, let's be silent. Let's be still enough, long enough to learn to hear the voice of God. Because there are some lessons that we don't have to go through. And there's some mountains we don't have to climb. But we'll always be climbing if we don't hear his voice. Until next time, my friends, listen, I love you. I'm praying for you. I'm praying for your family. Let's hear God in the midst of this. All right? Hello, everyone. Let's see, Tara, Rhonda, TT, Jess, Teresa, Lil, Carrie, Deshane, Renee, Nikki, Tanya. Bless all of you, April. God bless each and every one of you. Till next time, peace.